Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Godzilla Minus One. This was directed by Takashi Yamazaki. This is the 37th film in the legendary Godzilla franchise, which began in 1954, I believe. And y'all know that if you watch this channel regularly, that I'm a big cinephile and that like historical film stuff is more my thing. I know a lot about certain genres, certain subgenres, some more than others, some are more niche than others, but I have to admit to you, kaiju cinema is something that I'm not as schooled on, especially when it comes to Godzilla. I know next to nothing about it other than, obviously the clips I've seen. I think everybody has seen clips from the original Godzilla films, but yeah, I've never seen one all the way through. I'm admitting this right now, unless you're counting like the American ones. I'm thinking like the Gareth Edwards film or the Roland Emmerich film, which I don't really want to count those, especially not right now. But with Minus One, and that's another one, I knew almost nothing about it. And the only reason I saw it was because it was recommended to me by multiple patrons. And I thought, okay, well, some of those people I really, really trust with their opinions. So I thought, I'm going to give this a go. And it didn't take long for me to be able to sense that, okay, this film is trying to be faithful to its source material, faithful maybe to the original, films of the 1950s. And from what I understand, this film went through a lot of rewrites, particularly in the pandemic. And I think the result, it's like you can see the pandemic and how it's clearly worked its way into the material, just the feeling of, civil unrest and the feeling of government control. I think this movie, though, owes more to Hollywood filmmakers than anything. In particular, I'm thinking Spielberg is the main influence. There is a major Jaws influence in this film, to the point where they literally go out to sea to try and kill the Godzilla monster by trying to shoot it in the mouth. It is blending a lot of that pulp American type of filmmaking, which I think balances out a lot of these themes beautifully. Otherwise, it could have been too harsh. And so I have to say to the patrons, thank you for the recommendation. I went from not even knowing this film existed to it's now one of my favorite films of 2023, and it's certainly one of the more resonant films for me emotionally of that year, and it's certainly one of the most cohesive films. I mean, it puts the American filmmakers, we have current American filmmakers for the blockbusters and stuff, to shame. I've seen so many different blockbusters this year, and most of them were just overstuffed CGI, like barcode-written bullshit. And I've constantly asked the question, it's like, why is it so hard to make a really solid script, a solid movie? It's like, it is a difficult thing, but it should not be this difficult. They're making it seem like it's impossible. And I'm watching Godzilla Minus One, and it's like, yes, this is everything that I want. I think that this is a classic in the making, or at least a cult classic. I think it's kind of almost a perfect execution of the hero's journey at first glance. I think it's clean, I think it's satisfying from a narrative perspective, and also it has characters that you care about a lot. For me, the most interesting thing about the film is how it's able to balance all of these tonal shifts at the same time, because it does have a really like bleak, devastating, violent center to it, but it's also maintaining this crispness, this lightness at the same time. It has spectacle, and yet it never forgets what the intent is supposed to be from an internal perspective. It never loses the emotions, and they're always steering you to the right places in the story, because I think they come from an honest place, they come from a solid place, and I feel like the film got all of the reactions that it wanted to get out of me, just in the sense that, like, one minute I'm amazed, I'm thrilled, the next moment I'm almost in tears. I like how the monster is always working as this central conflict for different characters in multiple ways throughout the movie. So, like, on a personal level for our main character, I would say that the monster represents guilt and trauma, because at the beginning of the film, our main character is a kamikaze pilot. This takes place in World War II, and he lies about like technical issues with his plane, and he does it so he can escape the suicide mission. So he's very afraid of his own shadow in a sense, and constantly encountering this Godzilla monster is him facing his demons, facing all of these burdens of the past and being able to rise above them and fight, obviously a literal war that is going on in a sense, but it's a personal war as well. And I feel like if they tried to maybe put like an art house spin on this, let's say in theory, if Godzilla was made by A24, produced by A24, I feel like the monster would only serve as that. It would only serve as like an abstract psychological metaphor, which is fine to a degree, but I feel like we lean too much into that these days. It's like we're too far from the literal. I think when you go too abstract, a lot of the literal aspects of the story, they just don't stick, and it doesn't mean anything concrete, so it ultimately starts to feel kind of pointless, and naturally it's going to be unsatisfying, I think, for the viewer. But again, the monster is working working on multiple levels constantly. It's both like a psychological and emotional metaphor for barriers in our own lives that we must confront, but it also represents a lot more on a broader level without being, too heavy-handed. It's not going too much into the politics and stuff. There's a lot of images of like ravaged villages, and like you can hear babies crying in the background, smoke billowing, and there's a lot of like natural disaster type imagery that we have seen over and over on the news just throughout life. And so it's like you can feel the plight of these people that are begging to survive. And it feels almost like the film is attaching itself to the nerve endings of all of that, because I almost felt like I could smell the gunpowder, ashes floating in the air, black rain. It isn't afraid to show you the perils of the world. And I really love that, giving us a taste of the heaviness, a true sense of risk so that it has intent. But again, it's always pulling it back. It's knowing not to go too far, I think, knowing always what type of film that this is. And I think as grim as this film can be just by design of it, aesthetically even, it never feels one note for me. And it always felt, I don't want to say it was fun, but yeah, it's got that feeling to it. It's like I was never laughing out loud. It's nothing like that. And yet I was enjoying myself so much. I felt uplifted by it. And this film is really, it's only 2 hours long, I think, and it feels like the perfect length. And I cannot say that about almost any other film this year. It's compact, it's right. There's no fat to trim. I kept thinking about movies like Rogue One, or The Creator, or even Godzilla, and I'm talking Godzilla, the 2014 American version. All three of these movies I've just mentioned are all directed by Gareth Edwards, and I don't care for any of those films I just mentioned, but I could definitely see similarities between those and this new Godzilla -1 in the sense that like Gareth Edwards loves to use a lot of like heavy war imagery. It's like very Willem Dafoe Platoon sort of thing, and that's where he's bringing a lot of the pathos to the surface. But a lot of the time it feels like there's no emotional threads that are tied to any of those images, so they just kind of exist. So it's like when somebody dies in some really devastating way in a Gareth Edwards movie, I'm like, no, I hardly knew him, I don't care. And here I'm watching this, and it's amazing to me just how much those feelings are reversed. But I also think just with the Japanese culture and just the Japanese energy that I always sense, there's a very like staccato, sharp energy to the way that they speak. It's like machine gun bursts of expression. I think it really serves this type of experience because it does. It feels like, there's all of this repression. Like we're all trying to be stoic. We're all trying to survive, but there's just so much that needs to come out. I think it works really well, actually. And at that halfway point, it just really works because all of the emotion is sinking in at that moment. Our character looks up at the Godzilla monster in the sky and he's seeing all the carnage and the devastation. And it's just, it's a moment. Our main character in the film says that he wants to live again in the ways that he could not in the past and be able to give to the future in ways that he couldn't in the past. But again, he can't do any of that until he's able to self-actualize as a character, until he's able to face himself and face all of the demons, the weight of his past and the weight of the future that's kind of converging in the perfect climax. But all of that emotion needs to sit with the characters and their conflicts. But the Godzilla monster, I like that it's always very distant. And it always has to seem like this massive presence that we're terrified of. Just like the shark in Jaws. We never forget how intimidating it is, how massive it is. And of course, the iconic music is always reminding us of that. And the moment that you hear the iconic Godzilla theme in this, it gave me chills, man. And I've never even seen a Godzilla film, and yet I was still feeling the nostalgia of it. Godzilla is just fear on a basic level in whatever way you want to interpret it so far as it applies to your own life. But here, I like how all of the possibilities of that fear are focused in the perfect ways. They all make sense. They mean something for the characters. I know this is all common sense, or it should be common sense if you're going to tell a story, but we don't see that very much. I did have a little bit of a complaint in the movie, and it was the ending of it. And maybe it's just that I'm a cynic or whatever, but yeah, I just struggled with it. And when I say the ending, I don't mean like the third act or anything. I actually thought it was a great third act. I'm just talking about the final scene of the movie. It just felt a little bit too quaint, and I don't like it in movies when like a character dies at a certain point in the film, or like they clearly should have died, but then they show up miraculously at the end and it's a happy ending. I don't know, it just doesn't work. I like the idea of our main character losing something really important that could never be fully realized within the story. And out of that comes this beautiful gift, for the future in the form of this little girl, this young person. And that responsibility will be very important as he starts over. And I guess I just kind of wanted the image of the man and the girl or something to be taking, you know, steps together as a pair. I see that as a really beautiful image because it's not too sugary sweet. It reflects a bit of damage, but there's also a lot of hope in that at the same time. But that's just me. It's really one of the few glaring issues I could see in the film. I just really liked this film, and I guess if you're going to have an in to the Japanese Godzilla films, I suppose this is maybe the right one to do, but I'll leave that to you guys to let me know which films I should check out. But yeah, if you're a movie lover and you haven't seen this one, you gotta. And try to see it in IMAX if you can on a big screen, just because I think it deserves that. You really should be able to feel the scope of the Godzilla monster and all of that. But yeah, this is an absolute banger. I loved it. There's nothing really more to be said. And that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commissioned portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great guys. Thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch my videos here and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.